Okay, I'm glad you guys. I had sent a Teams link too. I just sent you guys an email, but I'm glad it seems that most of you found your way to Zoom. And I think we're hoping for Peter to join as well. So maybe we'll give him a minute. And then Serena, you said you can facilitate the meeting, correct?
Correct.
Okay, great. So maybe just give a minute and then, or once Peter shows up and then we can get started.
Yeah, and Peter called me. I think he showed up at City Council, the building by mistake, but he's gonna find a computer and log on.
Oh shoot, I'm sorry about that. Serena texted me as well to check.
Yeah, it was just in my mind. I'm like, oh, you know, ECC stuff, drive to council.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, we didn't say specifically we were doing it in person. I think just because we've been doing our other ones, we didn't think about not clarifying.
Yes.
There he is.
Okay, great.
All right. Let's go ahead and get started and call the meeting to order. And first on our agenda is to do a roll call. I want to, oh, shoot. Sorry, I just lost my video. There it is. All right, roll call. Covey?
Here.
Kersey?
Here.
Neil is an optional attendee, and I don't see him here. He's been on previous calls. That's why I called him up. Peter?
Here.
And Serena is here. It's me. So that's the subcommittee group. Next thing we want to do is to approve our meeting minutes from our last subgroup. We've done, you know, some of our meetings have been in council sessions, but we want to make sure that we're supporting our previous documentation.
I can make a note.
Say that again.
Do you need me? Do you need someone to make a motion?
Yes.
I can make a motion to approve the minutes for the last meeting.
Covey motions to approve our meeting minutes, previous meeting minutes. Anyone second?
I'll second that.
Peter seconds. All in favor? Raise your Zoom hand. Looks like we all agree. Okay. Thank you all. That concludes the housekeeping of our meeting. So let's get on to the next step in the agenda, is talking through the Q&A from our last meeting. And I'm going to pass this off to Cassie to talk through.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to stop my share so that we can see each other better. So first, I just wanted to review at the last committee meeting, there were a handful of questions that the committee raised that we kind of landed on as these are things we wanted more information on. So I just want to talk through the answers that I have found to those for you guys, and then we can have any discussion if you have any follow-up, or if you think that any of the answers to it, you know, need to lead to any modifications. So the first question that was asked was for that provision allowing identical homes to be built at the same time within the same geographic area. What is considered identical, and have other cities found any like gray areas or challenges with people kind of fudging that? And what we learned is that in order for a house in those new subdivisions where you have identical homes being constructed, the way that it works is that there's a pre-construction assessment that they do. So it works a little bit differently than doing the home energy score on a home that's already built, because it allows the builders to get a home energy score. A lot of times they're selling the house before the home is built. So all home energy assessors get trained on something called a pre-construction assessment. And basically they are able to obtain the home energy score by using the construction documents. And so for that, it truly is identical. So they'll say like, okay, these houses are all using the same floor plan and the same like, construction specs. So this is what I'm getting a home energy score for this specific one. So using that model, it truly is identical. Of course, after somebody buys a home, they may make customizations to it, but at that point the home's been sold. So it's past its home energy score requirement anyway. So, but when people are buying with one of those pre-construction assessments, they know kind of like what the base model is to it, which is at the point when they're making their sale. So it really is truly identical, because anything that's not identical would happen after the sale, basically. Any questions about that?
Just a quick one, Cassie. So just to make sure I understand. So the last question in the Q&A kind of talks about all the different measurements that are included. So all of those would be identical for like a series of homes being built together?
Yeah, based on like what is provided within the construction documents. And I don't know if the pre-construction assessment uses a slightly different methodology. So it's possible that, and maybe Peter, I don't know if you looked at that, if you would know off the top of your head, like which ones are all provided with pre-construction documents versus things that are later, but I'm pretty sure all of these things would be in those pre-construction documents.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that.
Okay.
I guess my main question was there's things like windows and heating system, cooling systems. So I don't know how many of those things are standard, or like how, or what stage of the construction process the windows are chosen, like for example.
Well, they typically would not be, you wouldn't know from looking at the plans what maybe that's not true. If they have the energy path listed, it would say which window, what the window performance was specified. It would also specify on there the efficiencies of the systems of the home.
So, and it's
when the plans get submitted.
And whatever that the way that that data gets put in, like that version of the assessment is something that is also offered as like a standard for like through the USDOE tool. So I assume that they, the way that it is set up maintains the integrity of the assessment.
That makes sense.
Pauline, did you have something to add? I just saw you turn your camera on.
I do. Hi, I'm Pauline Hardy. I'm with the planning department, and I have been helping Casey write the draft. And if you've had an opportunity to look at it, there's two sections that we added. One is for identical units being constructed, and one is for pre-construction. So the identical ones, they do have to use identical material to qualify. And we narrowed it down to the land division. So you can't, like, let's take Polish. You can't take Polish subdivision on one particular neighborhood and use that same plan all over Bend. It's only limited to that identical, or to that particular land division that it's in. And then the pre-construction is the one that Cassie was talking about, that they use a certified assessor to do the report. So just two separate sections in the code that we put in.
Yeah, and that's a good clarification from Pauline. Like in the code language, I didn't include this in the document that I provided at the last committee meeting because I wasn't familiar with it yet. But in addition to the like identical built home provision, there's one that's just like a new construction provision where it explains that that process they can go through to get the score before the home is constructed. But they're tied together because that's how the identical ones works with that same mechanism.
Okay.
Okay, so then the next question was, can someone refuse to have the quality assurance completed on their score? And just generally, how does a quality assurance program work? And what I found was that the way that the quality assurance works is that it's less of like it's less that Earth Advantage goes and checks their work after the fact, and it's a more proactive. So what Earth Advantage does is they contact the assessors and they say, we're going to come do a walkthrough with you as the quality assurance check. And then the Earth Advantage staff go through when they're doing an assessment for the first time and make sure that their methods for actually getting the data are correct. And they say it's really helpful because there is, people went through the training, but now that they're doing it kind of on the job, there's just like little things that maybe they, just ways that they can improve the way that they do the assessment. So the quality assurance is more of like an ongoing training, rather than Earth Advantage looking at a score that was completed and then going back and doing the same assessment and saying like, oh, we got a different score on it. So they feel like it's a good program and sufficient. I mean, I think, of course, there's the chance that, an assessor could be not following that protocol when they're not being accompanied by Earth Advantage, but kind of like any professional that's, hired to do their job within the home, like there's, Earth Advantage has taken the steps to kind of do engagement with the people to make sure they know how to do it well. And then there's an element of, trusting the assessors to do it right. Does that make sense?
It does. And that was I did share that concern too, Cassie, what you just mentioned, that is that they basically know when they're being tested. So I don't know if other cities have found a way to do this kind of independent verification or kind of with not announced verification, because I just wonder if there might be a tendency for certain assessors to start rating higher and then they start getting more business. So just kind of like being on the lookout or like finding a way to maybe, if someone consistently, their average is way higher than other assessors, if there's a way to still implement a check after, like an unannounced check for those. So I don't know if that's something worth exploring.
Yeah, it would be up to Earth Advantage. And I didn't hear necessarily an appetite for doing that. I don't think they believe it's necessary. And kind of like I said, there is that chance, but there's like a lot of other services that you hire someone to come in and do a service when you're selling your home. It's like, there's only so much I think we can do without being a little, I don't know the word, like a little overly involved, I guess.
Is there a parallel with the home assessment industry, like where they were seeing, drive-by assessments and valuations that weren't realistic, and then they ended up putting in rules and cracking down on that? Kind of keeping that arm's length. Are there any parallels? But if it becomes a problem, then it cracks. Then there's a revision of the program and
Yeah, I if it becomes a program, I imagine it would be a program that would be universal, not specific to Bend. And Earth Advantage and Odo being kind of a sponsor of this program in particular, and hiring Earth Advantage to kind of do the work on their behalf. I think we'll be monitoring that collectively, like all the cities that have a home energy score program meet quarterly. So there's support around it, and we're kind of always discussing potential opportunities for improvement. So I think what would be best on that is to just keep that in mind as something we want to kind of be paying attention to. I don't think it necessarily makes sense for Bend separately to try to come up with a system that's different than how it's working in the rest of the state. But there may be something, like Peter said, if it becomes a problem, we would maybe work on a statewide solution for it.
I think that makes sense. So just to clarify, all the other cities that in Oregon that are currently have a home energy score program only rely on Earth Advantage's kind of QA system, which is announced or like accompanied QA. That's more like training and support and making sure the assessors are continuing to follow their training, but not so much that all their scores are in this valid range or anything like that.
Correct.
Okay.
And I saw data analysis from other programs around the state where they go back and kind of do audits, which is a little different than quality assurance, but the audits would pick up anomalies and kind of see how they were coming, if there were certain areas that stood out or.
Yeah. And thanks for raising that, Peter, because that was my understanding too, is I thought there was an audit kind of built into our kind of other cities in Oregon too. So it's new for me to hear that there isn't.
Thank you for bringing that up. There is that. So the tool itself, and I can't remember if it's through the US DOE tool or if it's through the Green Building Registry, which is like the Northwest platform that hosts the scores. does flag if there's a total anomaly, like basically a number that just does not make sense, it does flag that. And I think it asks the assessor to confirm that this is correct, or like it happens when they're even just inputting it. And I think if they don't change the score, then like Earth Advantage has, I mean, we all have access to all that data, but that's something that Earth Advantage would be monitoring.
So that's more on the tool side as part of the home energy score.
Yeah,
program
that's
as well.
built into the tool.
But there's no like at the end of the year, 5 homes for each assessor or 3 homes for each assessor randomly chosen and audited in that way.
No.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like there would be value in that, but I understand that Earth Advantage is taking care of that on a state level. So maybe that's something as a city we can maybe advocate for in the future if we think there's value in that, and maybe other cities could see the value too.
Sure, definitely. Okay. The next question was, what does it take to become an assessor from a cost and time standpoint? And like, are the barriers high to becoming an assessor? Is that one of the barriers to program success? There are 7 steps in becoming authorized to be an assessor. The entire process costs about $625 and takes about 4 weeks to complete. It's if you go through kind of as fast as you can. Certain steps of it are kind of self-guided and self-scheduled. So sometimes it takes people longer than that, but that would be at their own schedule. So I wrote the steps out in the memo. It's basically that there's a US DOE training, then you have to obtain a certificate from the state of Oregon. You have to complete an agreement, which I think is just signing like a piece of paper. And then there's an orientation and then some mandatory mentoring with Earth Advantage. So again, we haven't heard that it's been an issue to get a sufficient number of assessors. All the other markets that have started up have seen a ton of assessors come on at the beginning of a program. So we didn't hear any recommendation from other cities or Earth Advantage that there was necessarily assistance needed as far as getting assessors onboarded. But of course, we will check, we are going to pay attention to how many assessors there are before the program would start. And if we don't have enough, we probably would not launch the program. And then we might start looking into like, do we need to help people become assessors?
I'll just share real quick that I spoke to a realtor yesterday, and they actually mentioned that they already knew someone who has either completed their assessment or is just about to, and another person who is on the ways to getting it done, or another company that is on the ways to getting it. So I just want to share that it seems like
great.
Many companies are keeping an eye on this program rolling out.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that. So the next question was about, can the program be enforced against the real estate professional rather than the homeowner? And I know that will kind of tie into the discussion we have regarding like enforcement in general. It sounds like other cities did look into whether the program could be enforced against a real estate professional, and they determined that they would not legally be able to do so. I asked our legal team the same question. They agreed with that. So I guess, Ian, if you want to just share a sentence or two about the justification for what you're thinking there.
Yeah, thanks, Cassie. Mary Winters and I did talk about this a little bit, and the state of Oregon, like most states, regulates a lot of different professions, lawyers among them, real estate agents among them too. So the state has a regulatory scheme, licensing and general regulation of real estate brokers. There's something called the Oregon Real Estate Agency that oversees the profession. When you, as a city, are thinking about an area of potential regulation, the first thing you think about is whether the state has preempted you from sort of dipping your toe into that regulatory pool, either expressly or implicitly. And while I can't say that there is an express categorical preemption from the state level that I know of preventing cities from regulating real estate brokers in any way, they are a profession that's regulated by the state, and it's just an area that getting into sort of professional regulation of different professions that are governed by the state is an area that cities, I think, are really reluctant step into. So it's not as categorical as some areas of preemption, but it's one where the state has decided it is going to do this job of regulating this profession. And so cities are going to be understandably very reluctant to sort of create an overlap with that may or may not be consistent with how the state does it. State has extensive administrative rules governing licensing and regulation of this profession. And so it's just something that cities, I think, are going to be extremely hesitant about doing. And as far as I know, although other people have looked at this more closely than I have, I don't think we've found an analog with other cities that are actually purporting to regulate or enforce against realtors. So that's where we ended up.
Thanks, Ian. Kavi?
Thanks, Ian. I just had a follow-up question on that. So that's helpful to know. I guess my one question is, I guess there's a couple cities now in Oregon that have a home energy score rolled out, or I'm sure there's more planning to do so. Is there any way for those cities to push for the Oregon Real Estate Agency to adopt some kind of opt-in program for cities to require real estate agents who are selling or buying or selling homes in that area to add that as one of the required steps?
Yeah, good question. I haven't thought about that. I mean, sort of as a kind of a categorical answer, I will say it's always possible for cities or organizations that represent cities to lobby the state legislature to change the law, just about anywhere. So a categorical answer, yes, it's possible, but I want to be careful about suggesting one way or another whether I or the city thinks that is a good idea, or whether it rises anywhere close to the top of potential legislative priorities to get anybody interested in spending resources on it. So theoretically, I think the answer is yes, but that's about as far as I would be able or willing to go on whether I think it's realistic or a good idea, or something that enough people are going to be interested in to sort of get, past the legislative goal line, which takes a ton of work for any statutory change or change to any regulatory structure. So that I can't speak to.
Thank you. That's helpful. And just a quick, I know it's hypothetical, but just a quick follow-up to that. If enough cities get to a point and they want to try and make it even more kind of systematic throughout the state, how does the Oregon Real Estate Agency, how can they enforce that for real estate agents? Is it just part of their kind of required what they have to do for selling?
Yeah, I mean, speaking again, extremely hypothetically, and not being an expert in regulation of real estate brokers, I should make that clear too. But there are professional licensing and, for example, continuing education requirements that are a part of that I believe the Oregon Real Estate Agency does enforce. These are set out in that agency's administrative rules, which are derived from, I want to say, Oregon Revised Statute 696. I believe that's the chapter in the ORS that gives the agency authority to regulate the profession. So I suppose in theory, there are all sorts of ways that could be baked in or included in the, I'm just, again, hypothetically, I'm thinking about a continuing legal education, a continuing real estate education module educating realtors as part of their licensure in Oregon on home energy scores. I mean, I don't know, maybe that thing already exists, but there are all sorts of ways that the concept could, in theory, be worked into the licensure or continuing education requirements of the profession that I think the Oregon Real Estate Agency would have a say in discussing, as of course would the realtor lobby and their various lobbying interests. So big discussion. Can't say it would never happen, but it involves a lot of folks and a lot of organizations talking. More so than just a city event, I think.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Does everyone, any more questions on the real estate topic? Okay. And then the next question was about whether scanning for compliance, like looking at the real estate listings, if that could be automated or if anyone else has automated that. I learned that other cities have attempted to create programs that would do that, but so far have been unsuccessful. It's definitely possible. Like it wouldn't be that difficult technically, but the people that own the data where it would be easy to do so are the MLS systems, which are managed by the real estate organization. So none of the real estate associations have offered up the data to, you know, for understandable purposes, because it makes it easier for the city to enforce against this program. So without access to that data, it's just been difficult to figure out how to do it. They said, Earth Advantage said that theoretically it would be possible for a city to like build some kind of data harvesting system that could scrape the data from the real estate listings. And I think that's kind of what was mentioned by some of our committee members, said they thought that was technically possible. One of the cities that looked at doing that also felt that they were like on shaky legal grounds by doing that. That was not a question I had our legal team look into. If it was something we wanted to pursue further, which I think is something we can look into kind of once the program is being adopted for sure. And if we're looking to streamline, it is potentially something we could look into, but so far it's been difficult to the point that no other cities have come up with it. Earth Advantage said that it's actually like a top priority for them is to figure out an easier way to do it, because they recognize that just the burden of having to look through all the listings and having a staff person to do that, they recognize as being one of the higher barriers to the program. So it's something they're investigating. They said if we find a way to do it, they're definitely, you know, would be happy to hear it. Ian, I don't know if you have any thoughts off the top of your head on
Well,
that.
I do, and I haven't actually thought about this before, so apologies, or not much, so apologies for jumping in. But if you want solid enforcement, you have to be able to establish that a lot of things, but that your enforcement is valid and rests on I'll say, faultless factual foundation. And in most enforcement proceedings, you do that with testimony, you know, a human being that swears under oath and testifies to facts. But I am imagining automated sort of scanning for enforcement, and there being a lot of time and effort in appeal proceedings because people are attacking or undermining the validity of your scanning, your tool, the mechanics of how you get from, you know, looking at the information to determining that there's a violation. And so that sounds like a lot of work to build a system that can withstand that kind of undermining, and probably a lot of work in enforcement proceedings to potentially try to defend systems or scanning systems that are less than perfect. So from a legal perspective, to me, that I would have serious questions as to whether that is worth the effort and investment until and unless we have tools that are pretty close to perfect. Because if I'm trying to defend against it, I'm going to attempt to undermine the validity of the system, and that is going to take a lot of time and effort to deal with. So that strikes me as problematic until we have really reliable tools, and it doesn't sound like we are confident that we do yet.
Kavi?
Yeah, I just wanted to first address Ian's point and kind of clarify that I think we were talking about using the system to only find the homes that have not followed the score, not for the enforcement. It could still be a staff member double checking those homes, but it would just reduce the list from hundreds or thousands to a much smaller list on a weekly basis. So that's, I think, what we're talking about. It would still be a human determining whether something is in violation of the code and whether to send a written notice or take further action, I think. So I don't think it'll be fully automated. I don't think we need to get to that level at a city of our size. So that's one thing I wanted to share. And then the other is, I just took so there's two things. One, I was doing some research, and it sounds like the data for this region is part of MLS CO of Central Oregon, MLS CO. And I wonder if there is a way to kind of, again, try and find a collaborative way to work together on this. I had a pretty encouraging discussion with the realtor yesterday, and I think their view is also to see if we can find a way to work together on this and not have to kind of come to it from a more adversarial approach. So that's one possibility I'm still holding the door open for. And then the second one, I just searched Zillow myself and for Portland, and there is a way on Zillow already to kind of see which homes have a home energy score. So there were like 1,900 listings or so in Portland, and then I could tell that about 500 of them have a home energy score, at least like advertised on Zillow. So I wonder, especially if Oregon as a whole, if Energy Trust of Oregon, Earth Advantage is interested in this, I wonder if there's a way to use some of these MLS searching websites to make it easier to find homes that don't have a home energy score within the city of Bend. So I still think there's an opportunity there, but I think we would have to do more research and kind of explore if that's possible.
Definitely. Thanks for that, Covey. And I agree. And it was encouraging to me to hear that it is a top priority. Again, it's like kind of a statewide solution. And Earth Advantage actually is hired by the city of Portland to do the reviewing of listings. So Earth Advantage staff are the ones that actually are looking through. They use HomeSnap primarily over there. So I know that they're definitely thinking about it. And I think, yeah, it's definitely something we can continue to investigate, but it seems unlikely to come up with a solution kind of before the fact, like before the program's working now, but definitely a lot of interest in finding ways to make it easier. And I do think we anticipate having a partnership with the MLS system to pull the data from the Green Building Registry into the MLS listings. That's something that they've typically been willing to do because it's helpful for their clientele. I think offering data that makes it really easy for the city to enforce and potentially impose penalties on the clients of their clients is something that I think they have seen as not in the best interest of, the real estate professionals that they serve. So I think that's just kind of where it sits now, but definitely we'll continue to build collaborative relationships with them.
And can I ask a quick question on that last part, Cassie, that you just mentioned? So just to make sure I understand the program, the enforcement part of it, none of that would change if we do look at any automating. It would just be more efficient for the staff person or the department that's doing kind of that review of all the homes. It would just make it's more of a efficiency at the kind of work level for that person. There's nothing on the program enforcement that changes.
No, nothing on the program enforcement changes, but it would, because of how much easier it is to identify the properties, theoretically more properties that are out of compliance would be found, so we would, so that's kind of where it's not necessarily in the best interest of people. It's being people that are impacted by the policy, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
And by not in the best interest, I just mean no one wants to be found out if they're not in compliance with someone, with the law. So that's what I mean by that.
I get that. I think it's just knowing that many other cities are already at 90% plus compliance. It's more likely than not that a home out of compliance would get caught, especially in a smaller city like ours, I feel. I think the total number of homes sold were 1,800 or 2,000 or so in the last year, I think, around there. So I just feel like it's not a very high number that we could potentially review every one of them. But if we automated, I think it's much more likely that we would catch every home out of compliance, which I think would, if we're able to do that in an efficient way, in a not prohibitive way, I think that would be ideal, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. I think, everyone shares that opinion among the other cities. So working on it. And then the last question was, what are the inputs to the tool? And because those inputs would be the elements of the house that strongly impact the score. So I won't read comprehensively. I included the list on the memo that I provided. I was able to review the actual scoring in the form that as an assessor used to get those. So it's just all the information about the roofing, the attic, foundation, walls, skylights, windows, heating and cooling, ducts, and hot water system is what goes into that. So that's all for the questions that we needed answered from the committee. Do you guys have any follow-up discussion, or the next discussion we're going to have is talking about the enforcement and kind of what was raised in the last committee meeting? Is there anything else based on these answers that you feel like we need to further discuss before being comfortable with the draft home energy score program? I think that's kind of the point we're trying to get to, is make sure the committee is comfortable with the draft program so we can start our public engagement process. Cubby?
I actually just had a quick comment on the measurements that are included in the scoring. One question on that. So if I'm a home buyer and I buy a home right now with a home energy score, and then say I'm in the house for 3 to 5 years and then I'm selling it again, and I made changes to some of these, is there some kind of guide that Earth Advantage gives in terms of what level of change would change the score, or is there any kind of helpful information for a home owner or seller to know whether, if they have the option to kind of continue using their score for 8 years versus kind of getting a new score in case it's gone up, without going through the whole score? Is there any kind of information like that that they're able to provide, or that is available?
I haven't seen anything like that.
Okay.
Other than initially, right on the home energy score document itself, there's the prioritized list of things you can do with a kind of a rough ROI. And then the Earth Advantage, or even the Energy Trust of Oregon, if you want to look for other resources, would maybe not yet reference specifically how to boost your home energy score, but how to improve the energy efficiency of your home. There's all myriad resources out there for that. But specifically to the home energy score, I'm not sure about those. Just because there hasn't been one yet.
Thanks for pointing out that list, Peter. I do think that's kind of one of the benefits of having, like, on the home energy score has kind of the highest impact projects. So I think you could deduce that if you did those projects, it might be worth redoing your score if you wanted to show a higher score.
That's helpful. Thanks, Peter. Yeah.
Okay, we move on to the enforcement piece.
Yes. Let me pull up, I just have one slide. So what we wanted to discuss today, this was kind of one of the big goals of today's meeting, is that when we had our committee meeting in June, it sounded like the committee generally was comfortable with the draft program, but the biggest kind of question people had was around enforcement and how to make sure that the program is going to be effective. And just to remind us, I think you're all familiar, but what we discussed as the steps of enforcement is there's kind of 2 layers. First is the proactive enforcement, which is the staff person who reviews all the listings. Once they find a listing out that doesn't have a home energy score, they issue a notice of violation, which doesn't mean that they're out of code compliance yet. It just means that it doesn't mean that they have a code violation, but it means that they are not within compliance of the law. And it begins a 15-day grace period. And it says you need to get a home energy score in that period of time. And then the staff person, a really key part in other cities' programs is that staff person works pretty proactively with the home seller to try to help them obtain a score. A lot of times they didn't get a score because they just didn't know, they don't know who to call. And so during that grace period, the staff person is helping make sure that they get it done. And then if after 15 days, the seller has not gotten a home energy score, then that proactive level of enforcement, which is that staff person, refers the home to code enforcement, and then it's a code violation. And then it will just go through our standard code violation process. And so the biggest challenge with enforcing home energy score programs has been that when a house sells quickly, as they often do, once the house is off the market, there's not really a way that we can impose a penalty with reasonable resource allocation, at least. And so then those homes don't necessarily have to come into compliance. So that's the part of it that the committee in the June meeting was kind of like, just seems like should be able to improve that somehow. And so as I was thinking about it, like I kind of saw so what the discussion I want to have from you all today is to hear if you guys have any ideas of how, if you've been thinking about it and have ideas of how you might want to change the enforcement model or do something to kind of amplify the enforcement to help address some of that. As I was thinking about it, the one thing I do want to note is that using that exact same system, the other cities that review most of their listings do have over a 90% compliance rate. So that system is actually working quite well. The two ideas that I came up with, which I included in the memo, is that you could step up the proactive enforcement even more. So that would be like that staff person doing even more outreach and education. And I was thinking specifically to real estate brokers. So we cannot, we've determined that we can't regulate this on the brokers, but what we could perhaps do is if the staff person is keeping track of the listings that are out of compliance and which real estate brokers, if there is any patterns behind like, oh, the people that use this brokerage firm tend to be out of compliance more than others, then that staff person would have maybe that staff person could then just work directly with that company and educate them further and just do kind of some more outreach about it. And then the other idea that I came up with kind of as an alternative, but I'm really not a fan of it, is that you could theoretically shorten the grace period from 15 days to a shorter period of time, with the idea that if the grace period is shorter, people may be less likely to just like hope the home sells before the grace period and then therefore not have to get the score. Because I believe that happens sometimes, especially when homes are selling very quickly. The reason I don't love that option as much is that 15 days is already the shortest from the other cities by far. Like Hillsborough has a 15-day grace period, but Portland's is a 90-day grace period and Milwaukee's is a 30-day. So I hesitate a little bit to like really go out on a limb with that one. And I'm also not sure that would lead to the intended outcome. It was just an idea I had. So anyway, so what I want to hear from you all is what you're thinking in terms of enforcement, if you like either of those two ideas. The recommendation that I put out there is that I think because the other cities have such high compliance using the existing model, that we should just start with that model. And then if after a period of time we evaluate the program and we're finding issues with compliance, we can kind of look at doing the more amped up education and enforcement. Serena.
Yeah, no, I was just going to comment on what I've heard so far and my thoughts on this. I agree with you, Cassie, that I think it's more important to have more education and outreach and discussion and collaboration than focusing so much on the enforcement protocol. Since there is such a positive uptick, I feel like our time and support and resources could be spent in better ways. And obviously down the road, if enforcement continues to be a struggle, that's a conversation that can be had at a later date on how to improve that enforcement. And I also agree with the 15 days. I think, that's basically 2 weeks. 2 weeks when you're trying to get your home ready for sale goes by really quickly. And we want to give people the benefit of the doubt, but also not extend it too far. When we initially talked the 90-day, I was like, man, that's way too long. But I'm much happier with that 15-day. Personally, I don't think that should be just lowered any further. Just wanted to say my thoughts so far.
Thanks, Serena. Kirsty?
Yeah, I also agree with the 15 days. I'm curious, when they receive this notification, I'm assuming it's like a letter in the mail, are they informed that there is a city staff member to help them? I think where we could really push for education is, this is more of a did you know kind of letter. Did you know about this program? Here's the link to the city website where you can find out who can do your assessment. It only takes this much time, to not like set off a lot of alarms of like, well, I have offers and, 2 weeks is not, 2 weeks is a quick turnaround just provide that information up front with this notice about the program, have it be an extended education tool.
Yeah, that makes total sense, to structure those notice of violation letters to make sure that they have that information right off the bat, and the staff contact person as well.
I also think that assumption that homes are going to always sell quickly, I think we're seeing that tide is turning, so that for the next business cycle, I don't know that we're going to have that incredible pressure that we've been seeing for the last, whatever it is, 10 years. If something happens that fast, I mean, okay, but I don't know that that's going to be the permanent reality. I'm quite confident it's not.
So Peter, do you feel comfortable with the enforcement then kind of as proposed?
Yeah, I think the steps look good. I'd be anywhere under a month, I think is fine to make it realistic and accommodating. Wouldn't give me heartburn. So I think as proposed is great, and then reevaluate as we go. And I'm encouraged by the adoption rate that other cities have seen. That's fantastic. I'm not for tightening it, shortening that timeline any more than 15 days. And I wouldn't be too concerned if it was another week longer.
Javi, any thoughts?
I think I'm also happy with the 15 days because that's the first notice, and then there's another, I think, 30 days afterwards, right? Before they actually get any kind of penalty. Is it total of 45 days, or is it another 45 days afterwards?
Once they're out of compliance, it's considered a code violation, and then exactly how it works after that is our typical code violation process, which I'm not 100% sure. I don't know, Ian, if that's something that you can speak to, like once something is reported as a code violation, at what point are penalties issued and how does that work? And I know there's a certain level of discretion as well, it sounds like.
Yeah, there's kind of I'd say a historical practice based on discretion that code enforcement has generally used when they're enforcing violations of the municipal code or the development code. What is built in here in this draft code for the home energy score is first, again, this 15-day grace period, then issuance of written notice saying this is what a code enforcement would call the notice of violation, which isn't actually the citation. It's kind of the pre-citation. Hey, we think you're in violation. You have 30 days to fix it. Again, this is after the 15-day grace period. If you don't cure it within 30 days, then we're in the civil penalty phase where we start assessing. So if you want to look at that as a 45-day period total within which the seller can get this squared away, that's fair.
Thanks, that's helpful. And yeah, I think I'll just kind of agree with I think everyone else's sentiments, that I think I'm comfortable with 15 days, especially since we've seen proactive enforcement. I also I think there's more on the proactive side that I think, and the education side, I think, and that's what I got from, I'll just share real quick, and this might be better suited for the next portion of this, but just, I think it applies here too. Again, the conversation I had with the one realtor yesterday, it was very much kind of working on the proactive and educational side, and they were very open to seeing it as another value add for the home buyers they're helping buy homes for. So kind of shifting it so it's not so heavily weighted on the enforcement side, but also on realizing we need that as well. So I think 15 days sounds good on that end. I think the one concern I do have at the kind of canceling out what I just said is I just wonder for home sellers who kind of know that the home doesn't have a very good score and might hurt their sale price or something along those lines. whether having 45 days and the average, I don't know what it is now, but I know it's less than that, and knowing they can get by without any fee, if they would like almost opt not to do it for lower scored homes, which I think could end up affecting the integrity of kind of how helpful the score is across the board, if it's only higher priced, higher scored homes that are being listed or that have the score available. So I just want to share that. I don't think there's a good way to do that without it becoming too punitive or too focused on that. But it is a concern I have, and something I guess we would have to keep an eye on, or the program would have to keep an eye on to make sure that's not being used as a kind of easy way out to not score lower scored homes.
Thanks, Kavi. And I think like in an ideal world, once the program is mature too, like you would potentially have homeowners, if they see a home without a score, be like, all the other homes I'm looking at have this score, where is yours? So there could be some of that kind of self-correcting thing, I think, if the program is as successful as we hope as well. So it sounds like what I've heard then from you all, I think this is a part that in particular we need to report back to the full committee on, but it sounds like after thinking about enforcement, the working group does not recommend any changes necessarily to what's been proposed, but just kind of noting that we'd want to be really good about our proactive enforcement, and that we can reevaluate after the program is underway if we are finding we have an issue with compliance. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And then I think it would be good when we meet with the committee then, if at the end of the meeting, we're going to talk about delegating kind of like leads for the next couple of steps. But one thing we should remember is to think of someone who wants to report back to the committee on this discussion in particular. Okay.
All right. So it looks like we're going to look at the ordinance now.
Yes. So I didn't have anything in particular that I needed. I'll just pull it up on the screen. I didn't have anything in particular that I felt like we needed to discuss with the ordinance, but I just wanted to hold the time to see if anyone had any, this is like code language. It's not necessarily something you guys need to get super involved with. So we certainly don't want to be wordsmithing this, but I just wanted to make sure as you guys look at this, that you feel like it generally reflects the program as you guys want it, or if you had any questions or concerns about what you saw in there. Kirsty?
Yeah, with the purpose, I'm wondering if the CCAP should be called out specifically, connecting it to that. I was kind of surprised it wasn't in there, but I'm new to code language, so maybe that makes sense not to have it in there.
Okay. I'm writing down any comments you guys have, and then
Okay.
as I continue to work with Pauline and the legal team, I think I'll discuss with them kind of what makes sense.
Okay.
If there's reasons things don't, but yeah, in the purpose
Okay.
of the CCAP.
And then with the exemption section, well, maybe its own section, but outlining the low income assistance portion that we've been discussing of, how the city will be addressing that. Would that fit into this type of document?
I believe it's in there. Pauline, can you remind me?
Okay.
We talked about the low income, if you remember off the top of your head.
Yeah, it should be in 4.1, so page 7. And then, because we met with Lynn.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, C, letter C under that section.
You mean B? Oh, C. Yes.
C.
So here's the language. And the other thing that
Okay.
we did too was that we established that we'll have administrative rules for the program as well, which allows us to further define like exactly how the low income assistance may work. outside of the code, which makes it keeps it a little bit more flexible.
Okay.
But we wrote in the code that the low income assistance program will exist, and that
Okay.
in the administrative rules is where, yeah, we'll flesh it out a little more.
All right. Thanks. Yeah, I must just missed that. But
It's easy to
Appreciate
miss
it.
things in code.
yeah, I'm like trying to decipher language. So that's good.
And I apologize if this has been defined or talked about previously, Cassie, but the low income, is that based on income or the price of the home, or do you know what factors are used to determine that?
Yeah, so we define it as the seller needs to be eligible for some other kind of low income assistance program that we provide. So that's typically an income requirement. But we're going to, rather than create, what we don't want to do is create like a new process of verifying eligibility for this program specifically when we do that already for other programs, because it's quite burdensome to do that verification. So we have a few other programs that people can qualify for assistance through our affordable housing program, and I believe through like utility assistance. So we'll use people if they are eligible through those requirements.
And a quick follow-up question on that. I'm just trying to think of, like, recently I've heard about, homes being part of community land trust, like the core community land trust. Would that, I don't know if there's any considerations there, but I'm guessing if the home sellers would have to qualify, right? So if they currently own a home in a community land trust and they qualify for another income assistance program, then that home would also qualify. Is that what I'm kind of hearing or understanding?
Yeah, like if someone qualifies for a home in a land trust, they would most likely qualify under the City of Bend's programs as well. And I think a lot of them do participate in the affordable housing programs that we have. So those people would be covered.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions on the code language or? Kavi?
So I have a more general question, and let me know if this is not the best time to raise it. Maybe there's a discussion period after this. But one of the points that was brought up in my conversation with the realtor and yesterday, especially, that I think I hadn't fully thought about until then, was this is very much focused, of course, like the CCAP action had specified, on the sale of homes. Are we planning to do any kind of overall education or kind of encouragement for homeowners to just do this on their own, either this or a more in-depth analysis to kind of increase the efficiency of their homes?
So as part of the CCAP, we have other strategies about improving energy efficiency of homes that are outside of the home energy score program. So there's quite a lot underneath, like a lot of outreach and education programs. And that's also where the financing programs fit into there, potentially other kinds of incentives for people to pursue energy efficiency upgrades. So I don't think in the CCAP, we haven't seen like the home energy score as the tool necessarily to apply to homes. This is a tool that kind of works specifically for homes being sold, with the idea that over time, as many homes sell, like many homes would have the information, but it's not the only tool in the toolbox for addressing the energy use of homes. It's this and the financing program, like the revolving loan fund program, are the only two that we're working on during this biennium. But there are others in the CCAP.
And as Kirsty, I see your hand up, but is it okay to ask a quick follow-up on that? And I guess just to explain a little bit more. So I think, and I don't have the exact numbers, but I think doing rough numbers, I see that there's like maybe 45,000 homes in Bend. That might be more. There might be a higher number than actual. And I think about 2,000 or so were sold in the last year or so. And I think the point that I think kind of makes sense is that if the city really believes in this program, which I think we all do, I think there's benefit to homeowners and home buyers having this information. Is there a benefit to also doing more education outside of this to encourage homeowners to do this, even like say they're potentially planning to sell their home in the upcoming few years. So kind of doing it earlier on to maybe reap some of the benefit of that and be able to find some ways to improve the efficiency of their home. So I guess what I'm asking is, or just seeing if there's any way to have along with this program, which is more focused on just the buying part of it, if there can also be something where we can recommend that the city also do some education to homeowners at large to either pursue this or something more in depth that I think Peter has suggested in the past that would be helpful for homeowners to have done on their homes.
Yeah, I think it would be easy enough with this program, it'd be easy enough to have just include in kind of the staff, kind of the resources around it, that like this doesn't have to be the tool doesn't have to be limited to the sale of a home. I think that can be included in like our website and that sort of thing. As far as like specifically creating some kind of educational campaign, like going beyond that, I guess I would say is something that could be done, but it falls underneath a different CCAP strategy, which would be more about outreach and education, about encouraging people to pursue energy efficiency upgrades in their homes. So it's one of those things that I want to avoid, like we talk about this a lot with a lot of the strategies. We need to avoid trying to roll too many things into one task, because it really is a different workflow. I guess that's kind of where I make the distinction. I know it probably doesn't sound like that to you guys, but truly internally, if we're doing a different kind of educational campaign, it's a different workflow than this program. So we need to just kind of like move this program forward without tacking on too many just other projects, if that makes sense. So I think it could be done. I just think it needs to come through a different CCAP recommendation, but there are some simple things we could easily roll in, like having a statement on the website that just reminds people you can use this outside of a home sale and that there's benefits, and some of that I think will happen organically.
No, I think that makes sense. Thanks, Cassie. And I just want to kind of wrap that up, so I don't want to get too stuck on this for too long, but I guess the point was that kind of maybe changing right now this program is something that we're having home sellers have to do, and kind of changing a little bit of that perspective on that, so that we can also at the same time get home owners kind of share the benefits of it and get them excited as well, to the degree we can, without creating a whole new educational program or adding a whole different workflow. But I do want to personally, I think that makes sense to kind of not just push it as a kind of something that home sellers are like, oh, it's one more thing I have to do, or realtors are seeing it as just one more thing to do, but kind of getting homeowners excited, like, oh, here's another way for me to know how efficient my home is, or find some ways to improve the efficiency of my home. So I just wanted to please add that in right now, because I think there's at least parts of this program that's going to be really talking about the home energy score, but it's only talking to home sellers or home buyers. It's a very small portion of the market. And if there are small steps we can do without creating a whole other program to reach other homeowners too, I would be in support of that.
Thank
There
you.
are-
That's a good
oh,
comment. I'm just being mindful. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I just wanted to address that. There are other programs and organizations that do like house, audits for energy improvement, as I think was discussed a little bit earlier. I don't want to name names right now in general, but I've done some in my home to just better understand the efficiency of my home and how to, save money. And so there are other, current situations in place that allow for that we could support through education as well, besides just the home energy score.
Percy?
Yeah, along the same lines, it seems to me like today we kind of focused on enforcement. Maybe we could schedule our next meeting to focus around education and outreach. And knowing that, more people are hearing about this discussion, and trying to address some things like this is different than looking at past utility bills, and really explaining that. Of like, this is what you get if you look at past utility bills. This is what you get if you look at a home energy score, and really just plainly putting that out there for people. Things like that that people are concerned about, understandably, if you don't know the program, and really addressing some of that. So I think this group would be useful in talking about some of those outreach steps to take and what things to get out there to the public to get ahead of some of those, and really making it about our Bend culture of wanting to improve home energy efficiencies. Unfortunately, that's just the way government works. So you have to require things in order for them to happen. And so we're just moving forward that language that we have, but really getting to the point of the program. It's not about enforcement or requirements. It's about improving efficiencies. And we know with the research we've done that this is a great tool. Even if it's not perfect, it's a great tool to move forward with. So I would like to recommend that we meet again to further discuss education and outreach.
I would agree.
From my perspective, I appreciate where the point Kavi's making, that how do we mainstream this and bring it to light? I'm familiar with great companies locally and great programs locally, but having been around for 15 years, like how many average people know about them and take advantage of them? So how do we leverage the private industry and the public programs that already exist for homeowners and bring it to the fore of people's minds, make it whatever you want to say, mainstream, cool, so the point of sale is a point where you can actually engage people and you know what's happening. The rest of the housing stock for people who aren't selling, I mean, who takes the time? But you can, every single monthly utility bill, whether it's the City of Bend Water, whether it's not Northwest Natural, whether it's the Pacific Power, they try to give you ways to, it's a tough nut to crack to bring this to the awareness. And I have other thoughts on that, but I appreciate your point. How do you mainstream it? And it's not just another postcard in your mail that you recycle with the other 15 postcards in your mail. Engaging at a point like at this financial transaction point is at least one mechanism where you force people to pay attention. So yeah, I don't have the answer, but I've seen efforts for 15 years or so locally, and just talking about energy efficiency on the purely the geeks who are interested is a long road to hoe. And if we feel there's a sense of urgency and this matters, I appreciate the thought process of how do you bring it up to people who don't live in this space all the time.
Thanks, Peter. I think you brought it up, but I think that's the point I was trying to make. So thanks for supporting that. And I also support Kirsty's point of kind of having a meeting education and outreach part as well. And if I can ask a question, Cassie, I know you mentioned there's other CCAP actions, but they're not as top of mind as they might be for you. Are there any specifically that either incentivize or make it easy or kind of do an education piece specifically around getting all homeowners in Bend to do some kind of, not necessarily home energy score, but do some kind of audit or score to figure out how to make your homes more efficient?
Yep, we there was a strategy. It was in the same strategy as the home energy score, but it was another sub action, and it said expand or some version of expand the low cost energy audits in the community. So that was, yeah, kind of speaking more generally. So that could be, yes, that is another strategy. And just kind of thinking about it, if we were to pass the home energy score program and establish that as a tool that we use, if we kind of invoke that other strategy as one of our next priorities, you could build upon the home energy score program by saying, okay, now for this other strategy, we want to build a program that encourages the use of the same tool outside of a home sale, for example. Yeah.
That's
I have
helpful.
some thoughts, but we don't want to go down that rabbit hole here because I could be here for the next 2 days geeking out with you guys.
We have 22 minutes remaining, and I don't want to rush us because these are all very important, but we do have a few other agenda topics we need to get through. So
yeah, and if possible, I'd like to, if we're comfortable enough with the code language, I would like to jump to the discussion about the public engagement activities, but also kind of just the schedule / next steps, because I think based on what you've been discussing today, I want to make sure that you're comfortable with how we plan on moving forward, or if we want to build in another meeting like you've discussed. So are you guys comfortable with me moving ahead to that? Okay, so first, as a quick recap, we also added something new. As far as public engagement activities that we have planned, the first step would be sometime in mid-July, we'll post lots of information to the webpage, and we'll launch like the public comment period and we'll issue a press release and we'll say, city is considering this program. Here's all the information that you need. We're accepting public comments from now until the end of August or whatever time period we think is appropriate. So that's kind of like our one big thing. And that's when I consider us kind of launching the public engagement. Of course, because we have the information already out there from this meeting, we've already been receiving comments as well. So the thought was to start that if you guys felt comfortable as early as July 11th or 12th, which is the week before, it's the week that we have our next ECC meeting, but it's before the ECC meeting. And the benefit of doing it before the meeting is that as part of that press release, we can tell people they can watch the committee meeting and that the program will be discussed. So we wanted to basically highlight for people that are interested in it, that they can attend the ECC meeting and hear it discussed, as opposed to like launching it afterwards and being like, oh, we talked about it at the last meeting. Sorry, you missed it. We're just telling you about it now. So that's the hope. And then I don't have it on here actually, but on July 25th, then we would do the council stewardship subcommittee meeting. So that's where we'll do kind of the overview to the stewardship subcommittee. So and again, in the press release, we'll include that we will be having that meeting. And then a new thing that we are proposing is that we would like to hold like an open house. And this was kind of brought up at one of the earlier committee meetings, but we'd like to host like an open house that we're thinking of kind of a Q&A session, which would be in person, but also with a hybrid option in the council chambers, where I'll do a presentation doing an overview of the program, and we would invite committee members to come in and ask questions about how the program would work. And we'll have a staff panel and also ideally a couple of committee members up there. So the staff panel would include legal and Pauline, who's been drafting the code, and other staff we felt important to that. And then that way we can have kind of this open dialogue, like explaining how the program works, and that'll be kind of the open house. I wasn't envisioning that as like a public comment period for people to voice their comments. I was thinking that it would be more about getting information out to people and then directing people to the public comment period so that we have all of their comments in writing. But we can discuss that with you all if you think what you think about that. So that's kind of another big piece of public engagement. And then, so that would be, I have tentatively scheduled that for August 1st, because that's one of the only dates that works on the staff side, really within the next couple of months. So I'm hoping that that date, you guys are comfortable with that date, but if not, we can of course look at moving it. And then we would close the public comment period at the end of August. And then from there, we would have time to kind of refine the program based on all of that stuff that we heard. And I'm doing direct outreach and feedback from the Central Oregon Association of Realtors. I was going to put on the website and the press release that any other interested groups that would just like a staff presentation or would like to give, if their group wants to give like direct feedback, that I'm available to go and do those. And if committee members are available, they could do those as well.
Are you presenting to the monthly meeting at CORE?
When I spoke with the government affairs liaison and the chair of the government affairs committee, they did not think that was necessary. They said that they preferred for me to just give them the draft. They were going to talk about it and then they're going to like report back to me. I think so they can, they can just have the discussion that they want to have amongst themselves, and then they can kind of distill the main themes and report back. So that's what we decided on when I talked with them last, but it's been a couple of months. So I'm open. If they would like us to come in and present, then we would certainly do that.
Well, I guess I find that disappointing because that's a pretty biased lens then that the information is getting out to their group. And so I know for years they've had one distinct side of messaging coming in at those monthly meetings. It would be, I think, a little more genuine or good faith effort to have the actual source of the information provided to the groups at a monthly meeting, as opposed to them kind of beat the dead horse they've been beating. That's just my sense of that arrangement with their group.
Yeah, I know that's a good point, and I'll ask them if they'd be open to us going in and chatting with them in person. Kavi?
Yeah, I had a question in that vein, to Peter's question too. Just to clarify, Peter, is that a monthly meeting of just core like leadership, or is that all members?
It's in my experience, I don't know how it's evolved since the pandemic. This is all kind of dated information, and maybe Cassie knows exactly, but it used to be a monthly all member, whoever could attend, and there was a speaker, some kind of informational person every month, and they were looking for people to speak back in the day. But it would be nice to have the program presented from the city's point of view in just a factual way without the messaging that I believe that the general membership is getting.
Yeah, so I would be in support of advocating and supporting that as well, Peter's idea. And also, again, another feedback I got having spoken to some realtors directly is I think a lot more realtors have also gotten a biased or limited kind of view of this, unfortunately. So I think if there's a way to work with CORE and arrange some kind of open house for realtors to attend and have like a Q&A directly with them in a more kind of meaningful manner, I would be open to that as well. I really think it would be helpful to reach the folks in the profession directly, and get their feedback. In some cases, there could be valuable feedback that could help us maybe adjust the code to make it more effective or efficient. But I really hope we can reach the group that they represent directly as well. And it's not just a few folks that are filtering it out and presenting kind of one side of it or their perspective of it, if that makes sense. Yeah,
I will definitely see if they're open to having us meet with them more directly. And I don't know if it could be that the big group, it could be the Government Affairs Committee, because that's kind of who they've tasked with reviewing like new policies. Like, I think as far as educating it will be up to them basically, but typically it's been the Government Affairs Committee that works on stuff that's like proposed policy, where perhaps if the program is adopted, then it would be a different conversation about, can we go to the all member meeting and present this as a new program? But I will ask them what they're open to.
Thanks, Cassie. And just one follow-up on that is, I want to be careful because I think most realtors belong to CORE, but I don't want to exclude, say, any realtors who don't belong to CORE. And also, I'm thinking, COBA, Central Oregon Builders Association, would probably be helpful too. So I almost feel like, I don't know if it's possible for the city to do this, but because those groups are going to be directly impacted by this, if the city can organize an open house for all realtors and builders, and maybe it's a Zoom thing where many people can show up and there's no limit, and then have a presentation, I think that would be valuable too. If there's a way to reach directly the people in the industries, and not kind of have gatekeepers, I would be in favor of doing that, because I feel like only letting CORE decide who gets to hear from the city or from the committee or about this, I think I'm not a fan of that.
Yeah, and so that Q&A will be open to anyone. I don't see us necessarily doing multiple Q&As for multiple audiences, but rather inviting, I think we anticipate people that are coming and asking about the people that attending that Q&A. I was picturing that being primary, like lots of real estate industry professionals and perhaps builders, as they are a heavily impacted group. So we can look at various ways we can try to advertise that. We don't have a list of all the realtors in town, of course. But we could try to email the email notice out to the different firms or do some other things to make sure that they're aware of the opportunity. So I guess based on what I heard you guys talking about wanting to potentially add another meeting, I'm just wondering how you guys feel about this timeline, or if you all feel, because basically the information, the big push of information is going to go out on July 11th or 12th, which is in 2 weeks. We're going to put together, like, I'll have an FAQ document that I would be happy, I'm going to finish that by the end of this week. So I'd be happy to share that with you all if you'd like to provide some feedback or edits on that. But based on this timeline, we would need that feedback and edits, you know, within a week. And that doesn't build in any time if you all wanted to like talk about it. Like if you guys wanted to review the FAQ or any other materials and then come back and talk about it in a meeting, we can do that, but we would push back the comment period. So how do you guys feel about how you want to move forward, I guess, in the short term?
Well, I think with like getting together to talk about the education part of this program, it just needs to happen like this summer. As far as like rollout of, I guess what I would like to do is contribute. What does education look like once the program is happening? I don't feel like it has to happen before July 11th, us meeting again. I'm happy to send feedback about the FAQ through email if that's allowed. But yeah, just meeting like sometime in July to discuss education is fine with me.
Okay.
Yep, I would agree with that as well on both counts.
Okay, and what about Covey and Peter? Are you guys comfortable with moving forward with this timeline?
I like this timeline.
I think I'm open to it too. And I think I agree with kind of Kirsty's point about the education, like the program, the code, that part doesn't get affected as long as we're planning to do a pretty good kind of education and outreach piece. So we have more time to kind of plan that and do that. I don't know exactly what that even includes and what the city is going, willing to do as part of that.
Yep. Okay, that sounds good. And I think for the kind of education, like shaping how the program looks once it's going, partially we will figure out after the program is adopted. So like the code will get adopted and then the program would launch we'd have a period of time in between. And that's when we would write up the administrative rules. So that it might actually be the best time to wait until we're definitely moving forward with the program. That's not to say we can't have a conversation sooner about that because it's top of mind. It might be nice to meet again later in July or early August and kind of brainstorm things, but I guess we don't need to come up with something super concrete. Like we have until really the program launches to come up with something super concrete. So some of what you guys might want to recommend might include like some of the outreach we do in between before the program launches. So I think thinking about it now, we should have that conversation beforehand, but since it won't be adopted until the fall, I think we have through the summer and the early fall to kind of continue those conversations. Covey?
A quick comment on that, Cassie. So I think I agree with that overall. I think my only concern in my head is we're going to pass this code, and I understand that our open houses mainly it's open to everyone. There's no specific outreach. But I keep getting the feeling that, the program is specifically going to be affecting, 2,000 or so real estate agents, more so than the general public, because they'll get information also from their real estate agents in most cases when they're buying or selling a home. So if there is some way to kind of get buy-in from them as a group and not, again, I think we should definitely try and see if CORE is willing to do it, but also not let that limit it. And if the city is able to do any kind of direct outreach to real estate agents, even if we don't have an email list, but just some kind of, some announced open house specifically for real estate agent or real estate agents. I think there's still a lot of value in kind of doing that early on before their views get hopefully, solidified kind of like that this is a program that they're not looking forward to. So I think if the earlier they start getting information from the city and from maybe the committee about this is what the program looks like, it's not what it's been kind of portrayed as, you're the real parts of it, and we're trying to make it as manageable and as effective as possible. I think the earlier they hear that before the code gets passed, I think there's some value in that. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, our tactic for that is to use this, like we're going to create this information that will go out to the public. There's no different information really to provide to the real estate community. It's the same information, but we will definitely heard that we will do specific outreach. Like we'll try to connect with the different real estate firms to share that information and kind of let them know that, I'm the staff person that they can contact if they would like to talk about it. But we'd still direct them to that same August 1st open house.
And here's my thought too. And, we've been doing outreach with them. I think they know that this is on the radar based on engagement and communication we've seen today. Not to say that over communicating is a bad thing. And I want to make sure we're touching every point that you mentioned, Covey. I do feel maybe we do this open house Q&A. And if we feel that there's an extended need for specific conversations with different groups, we can adjust at that time. Maybe not put too much on the calendar to start. This is just a thought process I have. Like, let's see how that Q&A open house goes. Let's see how the open comment period goes. And that probably will craft how we maybe want to continue and further our discussion with the different stakeholders.
Yeah, thanks, Serena. And that is kind of the purpose of the public comment period, is to get the comments, review them, figure out what the patterns and trends are. And then you do, kind of adjust based on what those comments are. So if there's a lot, if through the comments, it's clear, like there's a lot of misconceptions, we really shouldn't be moving forward because we won't be successful, you will figure that out then. So really, I think the important part about charting out right now is this first step, which is kind of like getting it out to the public, which I think is important because of course it's already kind of getting out since we have the editorial. And so I think the sooner we can get like the public webpage up there, and that's where people will have staff contact, and that'll help with that. So I think if we can kind of launch that in 2 weeks with your guys' input on the FAQ, that'll be a good way to start. And then we'll adjust as needed.
I mean, maybe I'm stating the obvious, but in my experience here, there's two different issues or challenges that we're working with. One is the actual facts of the program itself, how it works, the details of the content, the desired outcomes. And the other is like a philosophical disagreement about whether something is required or whether something is, optional. So I think we have to do the best we can to get the actual information out accurately. The philosophical battle, that's a different one. And that's like the elephant in the room that people are not talking about. And that's the big hurdle to get over. I think if we were simply talking about an educational piece, this would be over with quickly, because from a fact-based about the program itself and the concerns that are given by stakeholders, we can address those. The philosophical thing is kind of part of the whole political divide in the country right now, and there's no amount of education that's going to overcome that.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I think we just have to be realistic of like, how much do we really try to tackle that too? Of this is a much bigger issue than the home energy score.
Totally.
And so, we follow this plan, we follow this time of like, here are the facts, here's the information we have, here's the plan. And then we assess after this open house of what else do we need to do to address misinformation about this program. And I appreciate all the effort each of us have been putting in to try to debunk some of that, try to take these concerns and really address them, make adjustments where it works. And at some point, we may have to just like get comfortable with just, here's the program, and here are timelines when we're going to assess and make edits to the program too. but we got to start. So I like this timeline. I appreciate the work Cassie's done with it.
Great.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. And since we only have like 1 minute, the resources needed was just flagging, as you guys know, that we're going to have to include in the requests that some resources required is going to be funding for staffing and then funding for a grant fund for the low income assistance program. But what I really want to make sure we talk about really quick is that we do need committee members to participate in some of the upcoming kind of key dates. The first being the Council Stewardship Subcommittee, and then the second being that Q&A session in August. And looking forward, we'll also need committee members to participate in a work session in November and then the ordinance reading in November, December. That's the anticipated timeline. So I was hoping we could delegate some people to plan on leading those. I think there is a benefit in there being some consistency, especially for the council facing parts of it. So I know that we have some conflicting schedules with some of these dates. So I'm wondering if anyone feels like they can nominate themselves to take on certain piece of these or just be the lead, or if any of you have conflicts that you can't kind of be the lead for some of these things that we can be aware of.
Well,
I have family visiting July 25th, so I would like to be there since I was there last, but if others are able to, I will defer.
yeah, do we need to do this right now, or can we take a look at our schedules and get back to you on this? It's kind of a bunch to go over.
That would be fine, but if we could pick someone at least for the July 25th Stewardship Subcommittee meeting, or I guess, yeah, I can send an email and we can do that part by email, I guess, as long as everyone understands kind of these pieces of it.
Yeah, I do have one question. Is the open house in person, virtual, hybrid?
It'll be like a hybrid. So ideally the committee members could be there in the council, like staff will be in person in the council chambers, but we'll have the people can participate hybrid. Like virtual, it would be ideal if the committee members could be there with us in the council chambers, but not necessarily required.
Okay, thank you. That just helps with my planning too.
Okay.
And I've had a chance to talk to some of you about this. Peter and Serena have a lot of family stuff going on. I'm also expecting. So I want to limit how much I commit additional work of just knowing like I might be going a lot with the ECC. So just so you know that I may not sign up for additional meetings.
Yay.
Congrats.
Congrats. Very much acceptable excuse.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, well then between the, I'll just send an email out and we can follow up on this, but that's something that, yeah. I think we did get through everything today.
Patsy, a quick thing on the funding for the low income grant program. I think I had mentioned if there's a way to add a additional fee in the last meeting, maybe through Earth Advantage. So I just want to bring that up during this meeting. So it's kind of back on there for maybe if that can be included as a possibility for the funding part of it.
Okay.
If that makes sense. So like, I think there's like a $25 fee that goes to Earth Advantage. And if there's a way to increase that on their end to $5 or $10, I don't know what it comes out to, whatever is necessary to fund the program, I think it would be the best way to do it. So it's not the city taking money from somewhere else.
Okay. That might be something that we want to talk about a little bit more involved, because that's a pretty major kind of policy addition, I would say. So maybe I'll think about that a little bit when we want to kind of discuss that. Maybe as soon as the next committee meeting, although it might be something that we wait and talk about when we're talking with council about like how to fund this.
Yeah.
I'll have to do some talking with others internally, but we can float that as one option.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thanks everyone for your time today. We're 3 minutes over, but we had a lot to talk through. We have some follow up with Cassie that we want to do as soon as possible to get stuff on the calendars. I'm going to say that this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.